gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you Howie Carr.
Nobody has any basketballs here, do they? Well, listen, it's great to be here in Marlborough to talk to everybody, and I'm willing to sign books and you know, whatever it takes afterwards. And I brought with me the magnets here, so there'll be plenty of magnets available after we speak as I sign the books. And I'd like to thank Ray for the introduction. And again, I'm just going to speak briefly here, and then I'll just take questions from everybody. And I think I'm really happy that the book has done as well as it has, obviously, not just for ka-ching reasons, but also just to finally get the story out to sort of more of a national audience. And I've talked a lot about it and tried to, and as I've been on this media tour for the last couple of months, just trying to figure out, you know, how to explain it to a national audience, because it's in a way it's kind of hard to believe what happened in Boston over the last 20 or 25 years. And I was talking to Chris Lydon. You know who Chris is. You know, he works for he's got a show on WGBH, worked at the Channel 2 News. I mean, basically he went up against Bulger and lost his TV show, The Bulgers. And the way he explained it to me when I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, he said basically the mob took over an American city, and you know, that's really what it comes down to. Or you could say, if not the mob, a mob took over an American city. And it's pretty amazing. There was a guy named Johnny Powers. I'm sure some of you remember him. He was the president of the Senate, the first Democratic president of the Senate in 100 years. He was from South Boston, and he later became a court official in Suffolk County, and he was the guy who was in charge of the janitors. And of course, as you know, if you've read the book, Whitey had a no-show job as a janitor. After suppose everybody always thought Billy got him the job, but right before the end of his life, Will McDonough, the Globe sports columnist, claimed that he had gotten Whitey the no-show job as a janitor after he got out of prison. And anyway, Johnny Powers finally decided that he couldn't have Whitey as a janitor, even in a no-show job. I mean, it just, think about it. I mean, a janitor has keys, right? And who has an office in the courthouse? The district attorney. It just didn't seem right to Johnny Powers, who was a Puritan by no stretch of the imagination. And so he fired him. And then Billy Bulger became president of the Senate, and guess what happened to Johnny Powers and his top 5 aides? Their pay was frozen for 5 years. And Johnny Powers, he was getting older, and he was an ornery guy to begin with, and he used to call up people like me and Chris Lydon, and it just fulminate about what had happened to him. And again, it was amazing that it did, and I wrote about it. And he used to say, "This is as if Al Capone's brother became president of the Illinois State Senate, and nobody in the Chicago newspapers wanted to write about it." And that's what it boiled down to. And it was the threat. People ask me, who was worse, Billy or Whitey? And I was thinking about it one time when I was asked it, and it suddenly occurred to me. To me, they're more like a coin. One is heads, one is tails, but it's the same thing. George Kavarian, the former Speaker of the House, you know him, weighed 400 pounds. I called him D. Papagenos. He used to always say, they always say one of them's the good brother, one of them's the bad brother. So one of them robs you with a gun, the other one robs you with a gavel. What's the difference? And there was something to be said for that as well. And I think that without Billy, there couldn't have been a Whitey. There just wouldn't have been. Whitey would have ended up like a lot of these other dirt balls, in just either gunned down outside of a bar room or something on Savin Hill Avenue or Broadway, or he would have just ended up in prison doing a lengthy stretch. And it probably, where Howie Winter doesn't live all that far from here now, the former head of the Winter Hill gang, but he's he's basically broke and not doing anything. That's the way most of these guys ended up. But there was always Billy, and Billy admitted that, or he didn't deny it, I should say, at the congressional hearings in 2003. He was asked whether or not he had told John Connolly, Zip Connolly, the crooked FBI agent who's now about to go on trial for murder in Miami, whether or not he had ever told Zip to take care of his brother. And at first he thinks about it, and he says, Martirano told the feds this, and he said, "Oh, and was Mr. Martirano there when I made these comments?" And then he says, the guy says, I don't know what the counsel for the committee said, and then Billy says, "Well, I don't want to deny it from that source, but if I did, was it such a bad thing to say?" Meaning as if he was interpreting it that he had told Zip to make sure that Whitey didn't commit any crimes. Whereas I think Johnny Martirano meant it that he had made sure that Zip would take care of Whitey when he committed the crimes. And he certainly did. It's an amazing story that the Whitey was able to skate for as long as he was, committing all these crimes. And I ask guys I talk to about first when I was writing the book, and I've met more going to book signings at talks like this, and I always ask them, and I guess I should have asked myself the question too, because I was covering it. It should have occurred to me, even though I obviously wasn't as close to it as the guys that I talk to sometimes now. I say, didn't it ever occur to you that something might have been wrong here? That everybody that Whitey hangs around with gets arrested. The feds catch everyone he has anything to do with. And yet he and Steve Flemmi, if they're mentioned at all, it's as unindicted co-conspirators. Did it ever occur to anybody that maybe there was a problem here? And they'd say, no, it was inconceivable to us that he would try to do something like this. Even the classic example is the race fixing case. They were fixing, everybody in Winter Hill was fixing horse races, and Steve Flemmi and Whitey Bulger were the guys who were doing the layoff bets. They were giving money to guys, and they were flying out to Vegas to place bets on these fixed races. So they were right in the thick of it. And then the indictment comes out, and they're named as unindicted co-conspirators. But the FBI didn't care. They flat out didn't care, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Billy had controlled jobs. You had to, as an FBI agent, I think you still do have to retire in your early 50s. I think the age then was 50. That's very young, obviously, to be retiring, unless you work for the MBTA. Or get involuntarily retired by the governor, and you're a judge, and you just go on about your merry way. But they didn't have big pensions like they have now, or bigger pensions than they have now. So they needed another job, and so what Billy was always there for was to get them that job. Either in the private sector, or with the state, or with some utility that they regulated, like Boston Edison, where there was FBI agent Jack Keogh, was succeeded by Zip Connolly, who was succeeded by Nick Gianturco, all FBI agents, all FOBs, friends of Bill. And Zip would take them around, and I found this. When I was doing the research for the book, I just decided to listen to some of the St. Patrick's Day breakfasts from the 80s. just to see, because you forget, you do the story and you look back at your columns and you look back at the news stories, and that's one thing. But you're just looking for the real good stuff then. But I just wanted to listen to the whole thing, and I listen, and then when I'm listening to it, and it takes like 2-3 hours. You got to spend a whole night listening to one of these things, and he'd say, and over in the corner, there's John Connolly. Oh, Southie's pride in the FBI. And whoever the special agent in charge is at the time, they bring him in. And everybody gets a big round of applause for this guy. And then and there over in the corner is Dennis Condon. And of course, he was Whitey's first handler, and who later went to work for Mike Dukakis. And I guess one of the crooked agents in the book, John Morris, he's the one who eventually turned on him and tried. He was the source for the initial Globe stories about Whitey's special relationship, as they called it, with the FBI. John Morris, I guess he really went crazy one time when they brought he was with Zip Connolly when they went into the Senate gallery, up above there. Where the Senate is, and the Massachusetts State Senate gave a standing ovation to John Connolly, who was a member of the gang. Another thing I learned from the research, and I got this from a tape that I was given that actually belonged to Whitey. Whitey couldn't go to a lot of the events, even his mother's wake. You don't want, because you never want that picture snapped, of the two brothers together, or the picture of anybody with Whitey, basically. So he was never out in public very much, except at the liquor store, when he'd stand out at the Rotary and stare at me as I drove by. I tell you, you drove by that Rotary every day, you knew there was something wrong in Boston. You didn't have to read about it in the paper. No, I never waved back. Never once did I wave back. So I had this tape that they made when Zip Connolly retired, of Zip Connolly's dinner, and Gianturco was the guy who accepted gifts. He's admitted that under oath. I'm not libeling anybody. He accepted gifts from Whitey. He was the official master of ceremonies, but the real master of ceremonies, of course, was Billy. And so they bring on all these crooked FBI agents, and they're talking about what a wonderful Fed, what a groovy G-man Zip Connolly was. And they finally bring up this guy, Dennis O'Callahan, who a few years later would be the one who actually tipped them off to the pending indictments. And he says, I've got something to read here, the first document from Zip's personnel file. And he starts reading it, and it's a letter. And it begins, Dear Edgar, a constituent of mine is very interested in becoming an agent of the FBI. And you know who it was signed by? John, if you've read the book, John McCormick, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, who, for the younger people, after JFK was assassinated in 1963, this guy was literally one heartbeat away from the presidency for 15 months or so. And then after I finished the research for the book, I just, this thing, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's an obsession, but I have an abiding interest in this topic. And yeah. And so I was looking up clips in the Herald Library, the morgue, on the Guston gang. And I come across this clip, and it's one of these, it's so old that they used pens. They didn't even use tape, because the tape would just ruin the whole thing. So I take the pen out of it, and of course, you got to worry. You don't want to prick your finger because you have to get a tetanus shot because the pen is rusty. It's so old. It's a clip from 1923, and Steve Guston, one of the members of the Guston gang, which was the big organized crime bootlegging faction in South Boston at the time, he's going to sue the police, the Boston police, for for beating him up. And do you know who his lawyer is? State Senator John McCormick. And of course, you know who John McCormick's brother was? Naco McCormick. Naco was the top bookie in South Boston. So I mean, this goes back generations. I mean, I knew it went back 50 years, but it goes back further than that. And I also found in my research, Whitey, when he was in the Air Force, this is going to surprise a lot of you, but he was a disciplinary problem. and so he was being it was some proceeding one step below a court martial, and they bring him in and they say, you know, you could if you could this could end up with a dishonorable discharge, and you won't be able to get a job when you get out of here. And Whitey says, the kind of work I'm going to do, it doesn't really matter what kind of discharge I get. And then he says, but don't even try to do anything to me, because if you do, I'm going to bring in my congressman, McCormick. So they're dropping this guy at this point. I believe John McCormick is the majority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, and this future gangster is dropping his name. And there's an expression that or a saying at the State House. You know, nothing. Number one, nothing. Three things. Number one, nothing on the level. Number two, everything is a deal. Number three, no deal too small. And that's the world that Billy Bulger operated in. And everybody got taken care of or punished, you know, whether or not they were a friend of the family or a foe. That was his favorite word. You weren't an enemy; you were a foe. And you know, he took out Johnny Powers was hurt. You know the stories. Again, they're all in the book. I've talked about them a lot on TV. And you know, some of them they've never been able to prove, like Jack O'Donovan, the colonel in the state police, the lieutenant colonel in the state police. He goes after Whitey Bulger, puts a bug in the garage in the West End that he operated out of after the Winter Hill gang went down on the race fixing case. And Jack O'Donovan, they didn't like Jack O'Donovan. He was straight. And he had arrested some of the Flemmies, he'd arrested the Moderanos, he'd arrested, I don't know, he never arrested Whitey. But the next budget, after he put the bug in Whitey's garage, there's an anonymous rider attached to the Senate budget forcing the retirement of, I think, 4 senior officials in the state police, the brass, one of whom is Jack O'Donovan. And they've never been able to find out who put that rider into the budget. They in 2003 they sent the Congress sent up investigators to interview people, including some of the legislative leaders at the time, and nobody has ever fessed up to putting it in there. And you know, it had to be vetoed by Ed King, the governor, who takes a bad rap. One thing about this is a lot of the people that have taken bad raps in the paper, I don't think deserve them. You know, Ed King being one. Ed King, until Mitt Romney was sworn in as governor in 2003, Billy Bulger owned every governor between Ed King, 20 years of governors, Dukakis, Weld, Cellucci, and Swift. He owned those people. And another guy who gets a bum rap in the paper sometimes now is Ray Flynn. And you know, obviously Ray's had his problems, and he will take a drink under extreme social pressure. But you know, I could quote Rudyard Kipling, there comes a night when the best get tight. But every night? No, not. I don't remember it that way. But anyway, Ray Flynn, and this came out at the congressional hearings. This just amazed me. Again, this just goes to show how bold these people were. Ray Flynn becomes mayor of Boston in 1983, and 1984, Billy Bulger comes to him, and you know, the city of course needs help from the state. You know, if they want to put in new taxes, for instance, or local aid, all that kind of stuff. The city, and the state, controls licensing of liquor establishments to this day. The finance commission looks at the books, all that stuff. Billy controls the governor, so he can control all this stuff. And it behooves Ray Flynn to make peace with Billy Bulger, because they've never been close since busing. And Billy comes to him and says, "There's only one thing I ask of you, Ray." And Ray says, "What's that?" And he says, "I want you to make John Connolly the police commissioner." I mean, think about that. They have the FBI, right? They've cowed the state police. And now they want to take over the Boston Police Department, lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, in this case, to go back to that comparison from Johnny Powers, Al Capone never came close to that kind of power in Chicago. And Ray turned him down. And Ray paid the price for it. And it's, he should get more credit for it than he does, just like Ray Flynn. And people like Bill Welch should get more criticism for what they did. I mean, Bill Welch let him get away with anything, Bill. I still haven't written the column for the New York Post or one of those papers. Just going back and getting my quotes out of the book, which I got from the St. Patrick's Day breakfast. I mean, Bill Welch was the former U.S. attorney. He was told by the #2 guy in the Boston FBI office in 1982 that Brian Halloran was going to be hit. He was going to be assassinated. A couple days later, he gets assassinated, killed by Whitey Bulger. And yet, more than 10 years later, after Whitey goes on the lam, Billy goes to the St. Patrick's Day breakfast and sings and reworks the lyrics of Charlie on the MTA and makes it Whitey on the MTA, like it's some kind of humorous thing that this guy is on the lam. And Jane Swift. I guess I'm. Yeah. I mean, it's after all these years, it's still a punchline. All you got to do is say, you get in any trouble in a comic routine in Massachusetts, you can always bail yourself out. Jane Swift. Suddenly the audience is back on your side. But I mean, look at her final appointments as judges. She puts in Ken Fishman, who was the attorney for Steve Fleming, who was conversing almost daily with Zip Connolly how to keep Billy Bulger's name out of the testimony in the FBI informant hearings in the late 1990s. Another one of her last appointees was Jim Julian, or John Julian, the brother of Jim Julian, his top aide at UMass. I mean, the judgeships are just another appalling record here, And again, Ed King wouldn't appoint some of these people as judges. The two lawyers, everybody who remembers. Maybe you don't remember anymore if you haven't read the book. You've maybe forgotten Joe DiCarlo. Joe DiCarlo. Yeah, 78. The guy who went down on Joe DiCarlo and Ron. Yeah, he was going to be Joe DiCarlo was going to be the next president of the Senate. He was Billy's age, and he was from Suffolk County. Obviously, politics is a lot like organized crime. You got two people who are the same person, basically. One of them's got to go. I guess I don't have to tell you who went. And I guess I don't have to tell you who brought him down, the FBI. I mean, DiCarlo thought he was covered. He was told by Tip O'Neill that he was okay. I mean, again, these guys could go to the FBI and they could trump what the Speaker of the House said when they didn't own the Speaker of the House. They went out and they got more witnesses and they brought down DiCarlo. They brought down DiCarlo and McKenzie, the Republican bagman, and they bring in these two lawyers, and the lawyers do just a terrible job of defending him. And what is the lawyer's reward? Both of them become judges. And one of them One of them is later forced out of the BMC because he's involved in a scandal, basically, of fixing cases in the BMC. And one of the other people that he was fixing cases with is a guy named Gigi Keneally, who's a former state senator from Dorchester, who at the time was the Senate counsel. He was on Billy's payroll, and then one of his employees was Billy Bulger and Whitey Bulger's oldest sister, Jean Holland. They were all connected. I mean, everybody was connected. You know, the guy, one of the guys Steve Fleming named last year as as one of the FBI agents that they had paid off. I was doing some checking into him. His brother still works for Joe DiNucci. That FBI agent's brother. His sister or his wife, I can't remember which now, works for Marion Walsh. One day a week, the senator from West Roxbury. I mean, it still goes on. You know? I mean, now you have, you know, the Bulgers. The Bulgers are gone somewhat. I mean, there's still plenty of people that they appointed, but I mean, you still have, it's the same situation though now. I mean, look at Sal DeMacy. I mean, the Speaker of the House. When the feds arrested Vinnie the Animal Ferrara in the early 1990s, they looked at his address book and there was Sal DeMacy's name and his phone number in there. Now the guy's the Speaker of the House. Getting back to Joe DiNucci, you know, Joey Uriarty. His wife was on Joe DiNucci's payroll right up until she was indicted. He said, hey, I know the Uriartys. They're from Newton. I said, did they know Fat Pellegrini? He goes, oh, was you bringing up Fat Pellegrini? He's dead. This state is just, I don't know. I don't know if anything will ever change. You know, I put in the book part of the crime commission report about how they control, about how it said organized crime controls everything in the state, and it really is just. It was written in 1965, and it was issued maybe 2 months after Whitey got out of Alcatraz, and it was just it's the blueprint Whitey used to take over. I mean, I don't think he needed to have it in writing, because I think it was just kind of known that that's the way you do it. And he wasn't the first guy to be an informant, by the way. You know, you go back and you read Street Corner Society. That's the classic book about the North End, written in the 40s. Guys like Chris Iannella and the Langones are in there, and they talk about how some of in those days, even the gangsters, the mafia guys, you know, supposedly that lived by the code of Omerta, that they figured if they were paying off the cops, then it was the cops' responsibility to bust their rivals who weren't paying them off. And that's kind of the way Whitey operated. And I think my all-time favorite Whitey quote is the one, and it was in court testimony by my old pal Kevin Weeks. He said that Whitey used to be sitting there at Christmas and he'd be counting out the money and putting it into the envelopes for the cops, and he'd look up and it'd say, "Christmas is for cops and kids." That Larry sent another guy down to meet him at Foley's, and the guy said to him, and I just heard this just recently. The guy said, "What?" Paul said, "What am I going to do?" And the gangster said, "Well, first thing you're going to do is take off the gun before you hurt somebody with that." But I don't know. But the fact is, after that, nobody wrote about him for 5 years. I mean, and these were the 5 years when they were truly running amok. This was from like 1980 to 1985 or 86, somewhere in there. I mean, it was just too. You know, there were so many other things to write about. You know, I mean, you can always rationalize it in your mind, and nobody wanted to take him on. That's what it boiled down to. And the other point, the FBI, how did no one know what was going on? They were doing the reports. I mean, they were controlling all the information. I mean, there's another story in the book, and it came out of the court hearings. There was a report. There was a guy, a photographer for the Globe, and after they stole the liquor store from Stippo Rakes, he was driving. You know, we all know who owned the liquor store. If you don't know, all you got to do is drive by it a couple times. Hey, isn't that Whitey Bulger and Steve Flemmy out in front of the liquor store? And so the Globe photographer comes by. Hey, Maurice, how you doing? This is Maurice Lewis. These are he and Ray and the rest of the friends of the Marlborough Library. They're all here. It's good to see everybody. Anyway, what happened? This Globe photographer sees a city crew is putting in new stanchions or whatever at the liquor store, and so he says this is a great story. So he doubles back around, sneaks back, and takes some pictures, and he gives them to the Globe city desk. And can you imagine this? A city work crew. You have documentary, photographic, undeniable evidence, and the Globe didn't use it. So the guy, the photographer, he's frustrated. So he gives it to an FBI agent. So the FBI agent forgets about it for a couple of years, and then I'm telling you, this is the way they operate. I got another story about them forgetting stuff. So he forgets about it, but then he finds it in his desk, and he takes it to Morris, and he says, "Look, I forgot about these photos. What are we going to do about these photos here?" John Morris is on the payroll. John Morris, the blood drains out of his face, and he says, "You better take this up with Conley." And he takes him to Conley, and Conley says, "Oh, these guys are very valuable informants. I'll handle this." A couple of days later, the agent is driving by the liquor store, and there's a crew ripping out all the stanchions that the city built. And that's the way they operated. There's another story, and again, I got boxes full of documents, and some of them were sealed, some of them weren't, but I didn't really care because it's kind of in the past at this point. And it was in Black Mass they make a big deal about how the state police discovered that they had the garage in the West End on Lancaster Street, and they drove by and they saw it and they look, and then they come back and they double. It takes some weeks to do it. It's in the spring of 1980, I think it was, and so I'm looking over this report, and it's from January of 1980. It's an FBI report, and they killed a guy in Charlestown who was the son of one of the gangsters they'd killed earlier, and it's just like a routine killing. It is. They give it 2 graphs. That's it. And you know what? But they say in the FBI report says, informant says that Whitey and Stevie got the hit car from a new garage that George Kaufman has opened on Lancaster Street. And if you know that area, Lancaster, the FBI headquarters are at the JFK building. Lancaster Street is like a 5-minute walk, tops. And yet, apparently, none of the FBI agents ever thought to take a 5-minute walk to at least stroll by the new headquarters. I mean, it was left to the state police and they didn't even tell the state police. That's the way they operated. What? Yeah, they were some of them were getting paid, and after a while, you just don't. You just have to. You know what it's like if somebody's a spy in your office or your place of business, right? I mean, pretty soon nobody's talking to each other, right? And that's the way it was. When they had the DEA operation in the late 80s, which finally began to bear fruit, one of the problems they had was that they had Zip Connolly's former roommate and his brother were in the Boston DEA office. So they have to figure out, what are we going to do with these guys? We can't have the last time they'd had an operation, it had been compromised, practically from the minute it was begun. This is the DEA, and so they had to move these guys out. And again, as soon as somebody comes in to the office, Zip Connolly is immediately trying to compromise him. And their justification or their rationalization always was, and it goes back to the 1960s when J. Edgar Hoover said, he sent out the memo at the behest of the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy. They were going to get the mafia, La Cosa Nostra. And I thought it was a telling line in the memo that J. Edgar Hoover sent out. He said, "We're going to use the same techniques we used against the American Communist Party," which means anything goes. The ends justify the means, and that's what they did. You know, they were willing to let people who were informing on them. It didn't matter if they were Irish or Italian. You know, if you were non-mafia and you could inform on the mafia, you got a free pass. And that's the way it boiled down. And I was in Belmont earlier today, and people were asking me, there was a killing in Belmont, you know, in the 1960s. A gangster got killed in Belmont. I said, you got to read the book. It's all in there, you know. I mean, H. Paul Rico, the other Boston FBI agent who was indicted for first-degree murder in a gangland hit. He's now dead. He had an informant named Buddy McLean. And Buddy was giving him a lot of good information because he was tight with the Italians. He was the head of the Winter Hill gang. And this guy from Whitey's old bank robbing gang, Ron Dermody, had taken a shot at Buddy, and they were looking for him. And Ron Dermody knew he was a marked man. So he said he was going to turn himself in to H. Paul Rico. And so he says, Paul, I got to meet you somewhere. And Rico says, meet me down on the Belmont-Watertown line. Hangs up the phone, picks up the phone, calls Buddy McLean, and says that Dermody, you can get him right down the street here. I mean, that's how these guys operated. I mean, they killed Punchy McLaughlin. Rico had Punchy McLaughlin murdered by Frank Salemi and Steve Flemmy because they picked him up on an illegal FBI bug, calling him a fag. And for Rico, that was a capital offense. I mean, and again, it wasn't even a legal bug. It was a violation of the law to even be recording this stuff. And that's the way they operated. And by the way, you know, when in 1980, I guess it was 81, there was a crooked federal judge named Alcee Hastings down in Florida. Florida, right? He's not. Yeah, I'll tell the ironic end of the story. But they wanted to bring him down, and so they thought, this guy's taking bribes, so we need to get an undercover agent who can portray himself as an underworld figure. Who are we going to get to do that? They said, he's retired now, but I know I got just the guy for the job. H. Paul Rico. So they have a gangster. They hire a gangster who was masquerading as an FBI agent to masquerade as a gangster to bring down the crooked judge. And then, of course, the ironic ending is once the guy's been thrown out of his judgeship, he's elected to Congress, where he remains to this day. Yeah. So who's questions? Yes.
What's the origin of Conley's nickname?
Zip? That's just from Whitey. You know, Whitey that Whitey had called him Whitey called him neighbor. He called him Elvis, and he called him Zip.
Maybe that came out of you.
It's sometimes I get credit for nicknames that I take and run with, like the corrupt midget. The corrupt midget was not my nickname; it was Judge Dare's nickname, but I kind of made it my own. But you know, as soon as I heard Zip, you know, sometimes you hear a nickname, and you just know that's the one that's good. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, you thought, should we call him neighbor or should we call him Zip? It was like his name is Zip from here on. Yeah. I think. Well, do I think Whitey will ever be caught? Yeah, I do. I know. I'm probably a member of a dwindling minority of people who think he's still alive, but I do think he's alive. I think if he were dead, someone in the family would have turned him in for the $1 million reward. And you know, there were stories, and I don't know. I wrote about him in 2004, right after the election. But there were stories that he was thinking of turning himself in, and that part of the deal would be the family would get the $1 million reward, and that all potential charges would be dropped against other family members. Because I don't think that Jackie, the runt of the litter, I don't think he's the only one that was involved in this. I mean, we come back to the year 1996. When Whitey finally left the country for good, and you know, Jackie Bulger is adult. and he's supposedly one of the guys who did it. Now you've seen, I'm sure you've seen Kevin Weeks on TV now. Yeah, I know. Now you got to ask, now that you know who Jackie Bulger and Kevin Weeks are, you got to ask yourself, do you think these two guys had the brains to? They couldn't sneak a pony bottle past the garden security. You know, I mean, these guys couldn't get Whitey out of the country. So they're probably other members, other close friends or relatives of Whitey who were involved in the operation. They also snuck a lot of coins out of the country, apparently. You know, I think he's got a lot of safe deposit boxes we don't know about, which he probably still does have. But he had a lot of coins, and they got them out of the country. That's why you occasionally, if anyone's a coin collector, if you get the magazines, you'll occasionally see a story, you know, from the FBI plants, and you know, saying watch out for this guy, because they still think he's passing coins in Europe. And so the deal would have been for Whitey to turn himself in, but I don't think he'd turn himself in though. I used to think maybe if he's on death's doorstep, but who wants to die in prison? I mean, I don't think it was a lot of fun for H. Paul Rico. Yeah.
Did Jackie win the lottery?
No, Whitey won the lottery. Jackie won the lottery when he got his court officer's job. Not his court, excuse me, his court clerk's job. That was a classic story. I mean, Jackie Bulger gets he works at a fish market in Roslindale Square, and then he gets a job at the T, but then he gets a job as an assistant clerk. He wants to be a clerk, but they've already got a clerk. So what are they going to do with the guy that's the clerk already? I'm sure Whitey had his suggestions what to do, but that would have been a little messy. So what they do is they appoint the clerk to a judgeship, and that opens the clerkship for Jackie. Jackie gets a divorce from his wife. Where does she get a job? In the public or the private sector? She gets a job working at the West Roxbury District Court. He's got a daughter, Beth Ann Zoda. This is Jackie. Does she get a job in the private or the public sector? She gets a job working in the Senate President's office, along with her aunt, Jean Holland. And I remember one day we were asking, Eric Fernstrom, who's now the spokesman for Romney, and I were doing a story on the Hack Family of the Year. And after a nationwide search, we'd settled on the Bulger family. And so I forget who it was, if it was him or me, who made the call to the Senate President's office. Beth Ann Zoda had been on the payroll for a couple of years at this point. And so I think it was me, actually. I said, can I speak to Beth Ann Zoda? Who? Beth Ann, of course, has a husband named Mark Zoda. Would he be in the public or the private sector? He'd be working for the MBTA. She had a brother, too. Public or private? MBTA.
That's somebody's passport.
Massport? Oh, yeah, I think at the fire department. I think one of the sons-in-laws is at the fire department. Another son-in-law is at the somewhere in the Senate President's office. Then you got Chris Bulger is at the probation office. And I mean, I've just, at this point, I've just kind of lost track. Oh, I'll tell you, I give you a great example. One of the sisters is married to the guy who was the head of the environmental police. And the guy told me this at a book signing. He was a retired environmental cop. They got a call one time that they'd found a body, and they thought it was Whitey or a Whitey victim, you know, wherever it was, whatever forest it was in. And so this guy had to call to get overtime authorized to look for the body. Do you know who he had to call? Whitey's brother-in-law. Another one of the sisters. I still remember this. This is from 1987. Billy and Mike Dukakis were up on the stage at St. Patrick's Day, and Billy says, "And here's my family. Here's these and people, and here, Governor, is Carol McCarthy. Would you believe she's not on a state payroll?" And in one of his last Senate statements, Governor Dukakis said, "I don't believe that." And sure enough, a few weeks later, she went to work for Jerry D'Amico. Remember him? Jerry D'Amico, the guy who was the former senator who ended his campaign for lieutenant governor when he put his arm around Billy at the convention and said, "This is the guy I work for," and everybody else said, "See ya." And so anyway, her name was Carol McCarthy. Carol McCarthy got a job eventually at the state archives after D'Amico got fired, and she was an assistant to the archivist. It was a very strange situation, you know. Now, in most places, if you have an archivist and an assistant to the archivist, who would you think would be paid more money? But in this case, the assistant to the archivist was paid more money than the archivist. So, yes. How to keep up my perseverance? It's great. It's great. I mean, it's just such great copy. You know, I mean, it's just such a wonderful story. I mean, for me, it's a wonderful story. Anyway, I mean, it fascinated me that this kind of stuff could go on, and also, you know, I did get the death threats, and you know, when you think somebody may be trying to kill you, I mean, you have to keep an eye on them. It's common sense. And that's what I did. And you know, I don't believe, by the way, I don't believe any of that stuff. And as I've said repeatedly in public about Kevin Weeks putting a basketball full of explosives in my front yard, or trying to pick me off from the graveyard in Acton, across the street from where I lived. But you know, the fact is, they did go to Jack Hines, the former anchor and the son of the ex-mayor, and they did tell him that they were going to. One of them told him that they were going to put me in a dumpster chop me up and put me in a dumpster if I ever came into the liquor store. And again, Whitey knew who I was, and I had to drive by there every day, or every other day, and they would stare at me, and you know, it's just kind of, I mean, it's just amazing when you look back on it that this guy. I mean, it's not like he was in hiding. He was just right out there on the street, and you know, when the cars would come around and he recognized somebody, he'd be like this, waving. I mean, it was like he was doing a standout. He was like a Paul doing a standout the day before the election, and I don't know. It always seemed to me like it was the best story going. No, I never carried a gun. No, I wasn't raised around guns, so I thought about buying a gun, but what would I, you know, I'd be like Paul Corsetti, you know, I might hurt somebody with it.
So were you afraid when you drove by or in the head?
I didn't think they were going to grab me then. I always thought that they were going, I always thought that they'd make a move on me probably in Boston somewhere, you know, and one thing I started doing after Jack Hines reported what they'd said to me is I started driving home a different way every night, because I started, you know, you just start thinking in your head, who did they get, and how did they get them, and if you're a creature of habit, that makes it they can always get you. You know, look, they've got the president in the past, they can get you, but you got to make it as tough as you can. You got to give yourself the edge. So you always go home a different way. You do things differently, and you really don't want to get caught flat-footed coming out of a bar, because that's the way they really like to take people out, you know, at night. And they did that over and over again. So I've never been nearly I used to hang out at Foley's all the time in the South End, and it was just too close to Triple O's and the Liquor Mart. I just stopped going there. So that's, but again, you can't let it. The thing is, you can't tell anybody either that you're, because you seem like you're number one, you seem like you're over dramatizing the case, you know, and that's the great thing about what Kevin Weeks did for me. I mean, he did me a great favor. I mean, he sold tens of thousands of extra copies of my book, no question about it, and thank you, Kevin, and the thing was, When I came to the interview with 60 Minutes, you know, they had sort of told me that first the producer comes to me and says, "I can't speak to you on the phone. I got to speak to you in person." And so I said, "Okay, come on over." And so he says, "I can't tell you what the exact threats are, but Kevin Weeks says." And I said, "Don't tell me, the graveyard." Because I've been hearing the graveyard story for 10 years. It's in my book. It's in the preface. So I showed it to him, and I said, you understand, I've known about this for a long time. And so that didn't deter them. This is one of those stories, Maurice, where, you know, they didn't dare check the facts because it might ruin the whole story, you know? It was too good a story to check the facts. So after they interviewed me, I thought to myself, driving back, because now I know the whole story. He's lying in the graveyard. I said, there's a damn problem with this story. So what is it? What is it? And then it suddenly occurs to me, there's a stone wall around the graveyard. He's got to come way. So what they did was they keep coming further and further back into the graveyard. I think they were practically to Route 2A before they got an open shot. And then they got the open shot on the front door, which I never used. And then as Jerry Callahan pointed out to me, which I'd forgotten about, is I'm supposed to be coming out of the house holding my kid's hand in the morning. Now, we've all got kids, right? I mean, how often do you hold your kid's hand as you go out in the... What is this, a B movie? Come on. Hey, get going, kid. Hey, you left your lunch again. Get back in there and get it. You know, you don't hold your kid's hand. It was just silly stuff. But again, he did me a big favor, so I got no gripe about that. If I'd said it, I'd be James Fry. As it is, I'm a crusading journalist. Yes. I think he works for his brother. One of his brothers is a developer, and he's just like does basic, construction type work. He's, I don't think he's, you probably, if you go into Mass General for brain surgery, you're not going to see him there, I don't think. Yes. Did the Southie Mafia get along with the Italian Mafia? No, I don't think so. They kind of tolerated each other, and there's the famous one of the great FBI tapes, which I used a lot of in the book, is when they bring in one of the guys who was one of the runners for the race fixing, and he's hanging out with a mafia guy, and they tell him he better pay off what he owes to Howie and Howie Winter. And Steve Flemmy and Whitey, because otherwise they're going to kill him, and they don't want their soldier John Cincotti killed. And Cincotti, of course, he was in danger because he couldn't get a gun permit because he was a convicted felon, and he had his state senator Michael Opresti working on getting him the gun permit. And by the way, would you care to guess where John Cincotti, the made mafia soldier, worked at the time? He was a door opener in the state senate. But they didn't get along. I mean, I think they got along more with the Winter Hill guys. I mean, the original Winter Hill guys, the guys that were really from Somerville, Howie Winter, Buddy McLean, and Johnny Moderano, guys like that. I mean, Jerry Angiulo actually warned Howie Winter to stay away from that guy, Fat Tony Shula, who was the guy who was actually fixing the races, who became a witness against him. So I mean, that was a nice heads up he gave him. But I think they would have killed him if they'd have gotten the chance. The thing about Whitey though is he was a squirrel, as Frank Salemi called him. I mean, and he until everybody was eliminated, he stayed in his own sphere, and he basically used the cops as his enforcement. I was talking to another guy recently. Zanino wanted to open up some card games, some after-hours card games in Andrew Square, which is Southie, so that's Whitey's territory. But Whitey, this was the early '80s. Whitey can't take him on. He can't take on Zanino. There's only two of them left, basically, Stevie and Whitey. So he can't go to the Boston cops because the Boston cops are getting paid off. They're down with the games. So what Whitey does is he goes to Connolly, and then Connolly tips off the state police, and the state police go in and take out the card games, and they arrest the Italians and basically preserve Whitey's monopoly. I mean, it's not an ethnic thing. It's just, just corruption, and yeah, it's just business. Exactly, it's just business. Yes. Fat Pellegrini? No, he wasn't. He was just kind of like a local bookmaker type guy, and I like to give DiNucci grief about Fat Pellegrini. I just always liked that nickname. The fact that it's fat singular, not Fats Domino, or Minnesota Fats. This is just one fat. Yes. Vera, yes. I think so. I tried to interview Vera, and he obviously didn't want to be interviewed. And I just heard today that one of the Vera relatives has bought Mellotone, which is the vending machine company that they were trying to shake down. That some of them were trying to shake down. I think that Whitey spent a lot of time in those gay bars, and.
Was running to put an income tax evasion. It came out in the newspaper articles. There was a connection with the Vera brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They were involved in it somehow.
Yeah.
I wondered if Whitey may have been involved.
I think supposedly he was down there handling, he was down in Province. He always justified being in Provincetown all the time by the fact that he was, doing work for Vera. But I don't think Vera needed him to do any work. I think he had extracurricular interests down in Provincetown. As you can see from the pictures in my book, and we have the magnets. The pink magnets are available after we finish this. Why do you hang around gay bars? Why do people usually hang around gay bars? He has a girlfriend. I mean, a lot of people have girlfriends. Yeah. No, I think he was definitely gay.
Whitey?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he was gay. The thing, he's not gay, I don't know, bisexual or whatever. I mean, he was with guys. It goes back to the his initial job. He was a male hustler. I wrote about it in the book. He started out as a male hustler. Supposedly that's where he met Rico. And again, this is why Rico took it so personally when Punchy McLaughlin called him a fag. And his closest friend at Alcatraz was the Choctaw Kid, Clarence Carnes, and Carnes died of AIDS. And why do you think they always look? There's a story about every 6 months. The FBI is in Thailand looking for Whitey. It's not because he's involved in any kind of, relief for the victims of the floods. So that he definitely goes. The other thing too, and look at the picture in the book and on the magnet of him. And I've talked to people about it. I said, people who went away, who got ratted out or had trouble in the 80s and went away, they say, I can't believe all this crap was going on in the late 80s, because he used to hang out at Jock's too, another Vera joint, the transvestite bar in the Bay Village. Yeah. And he would always say, one night, they used to see him there a lot. They'd be looking for guys. The mafia would be looking for guys, and I take the mafia at their word when they say they were looking for guys. And they say, "What are you doing here, Whitey?" "I'm looking for a guy too." Now they say, "Yeah, he was looking for a guy, all right." But he never, until everybody else was eliminated, he never really, came out, so to speak. But like that picture in Provincetown, the Village People picture. I mean, that's from the late '80s, after Howie Winter and Zanino and Angiulo and all those. Everybody's gone. He doesn't have to worry anymore. Yes. Kevin White. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the great lines in the book. And again, this is gets back to why did it take all these years to come out? It's Chris Lydon's interview with Kevin White after the 1979 mayoral election, and they're doing the cutaways, the reversal shots, and you have to. Chris has to just listen, and they have Kevin White talking, and it's, you know, I guess it's, you know, you could say maybe it's off the record, maybe it's not, but Kevin White starts talking about Billy Bulger, and he says how come the media never goes after the tough one? Getting back to your questions, why does the media never go after the tough ones? He says, you take Billy Bulger, who I like. He said, you know, if my brother threatened to kill you, or you thought he would kill you, you'd be nothing but nice to me. I mean, this is the mayor of the city of Boston saying this, and it's on videotape. And then he tells this story about how he's at the Boston Athletic Club one night in South Boston, and he realized it's foggy and everything, and he doesn't even want to go into the parking lot. This is during busing, because he's afraid Whitey is going to pick him off, because the city council president at the time is Jerry O'Leary, who's in the, not in the gang, but he's from Southie, and he's an anti-busser, and he's corrupt as hell, you know. So obviously they could do business with him. He later went to prison himself. So, you know, people always ask me, well, are you sure you had to be worried about Whitey killing you? And I said, well, you know, if the mayor of Boston was concerned about it, I think I better take precautions too. Yes. Dennis Condon. I mean, this is a long story about Dennis Condon. I mean, this guy goes back a long way with Whitey. Dennis Condon. By the way, when the first thing in Whitey's file about becoming an informant is from I think it's from 1970. And it's a letter, it's a missive from the director of the FBI, i.e. J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover specifically tells the Boston office to recruit Whitey, who's like a minor, you know, leg breaker for an equally minor gangster in South Boston. They're going to recruit him. And so they send out Condon. And in the meantime, Condon is also, they use, Flemmy was one of their informants from the beginning, and they had in 1972, Flemmy and Salemi are hiding out in New York City. They're wanted on an old murder from the 60s involving one of the Bennett brothers. So all of a sudden, Dennis Condon starts sending all these memos down to a certain new young agent in New York City about keep an eye open for a guy named Frank Salemi. And do you know who the agent is? Zip Connolly. So he sends down pictures, he sends down all this stuff. Suddenly Flemmy says, hey, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm going to Montreal. A couple days later, Salemi's walking down the street, and in the city of 8 million people, the naked city, John Connolly just happens to recognize Frank Salemi, makes the pinch, and gets sent back to Boston. And you know, during the FBI hearings, when Condon pretended or said that he couldn't remember anything, one of the lawyers said, now why did you send these pictures of Frank Salemi down to Connolly? And he said, I was trying to spark him. And the guy says, did you ever send him any pictures of Steve Flemmy to try to spark him? And of course the answer was no, he didn't. It was just that, number one, they needed to set up a patsy for those murders, and number two, they needed to get Flemmy back to. This is my suspicion. I can't prove anything, and they needed to get Connolly back to Boston, which they did, and then of course Condon again got a nice job at. As the Undersecretary of Transportation. He was actually there at the meeting where they gave John Morris at the dinner in Lexington, where Whitey and Stevie gave John Morris $5,000. He was smart enough to leave before any of the bribery went down. But I mean, I don't think any of these guys. I mean, Condon was Rico's partner. How could he not know what was going on? Yeah. I don't know what made. What has made Boston unique? I don't. That's a hard question to answer. I tell you, you know, I mean, there have been agents go bad. There's a guy who's about to be tried in New York, Lindsay Del Vecchio, I think is his name, and he was supposedly feeding information in a mafia war in the Colombo family. But what I always say is, as far as I know, Boston is the only place where you had 2 FBI agents indicted on first-degree murder charges involving gangland hits. And, you know, and again, it's not local stuff either. I mean, Rico is indicted in Oklahoma, and Connolly is indicted in Florida. I mean, these tentacles go out certainly all over the eastern half of the country. Anyone else here? Oh yeah, a few more questions. No, they aren't. No, believe me, when Whitey left town, I was on cloud 9. I was so happy. Yes. Not lately. He used to look around. He used to look around the State House and he'd say, he wouldn't come out and he'd go, "Is the savage gone?" So for this book, I sent out a Harvard guy. I had this Harvard guy working for me, pretending to do a paper, and he was doing a paper. It was what became my book, and and he tricked everybody else, but damn it, he couldn't trick Billy. One more question in the back there. Yes. Where is he now? I think he's in the United Kingdom. That would be my guess. But I know he's not in the U.S., and I'm guessing he's somewhere in Europe. Lesser chance he's in a place like Costa Rica or Uruguay, but my best guess is the UK. Okay, one more. Okay, I just walked in. We were coming in, and Billy was working the rope line, you know, of everybody waiting to get in, and this was before it happened. And so he goes, hello, how are you? And I go, how much did this cost the taxpayers? That's the. What? So they finally let us in, and I'm with John Keller, and Virgin Boy, my producer at the time, who's now at 25, and so VB, and so Keller's ahead of me, and then he sees it and he says, "Howie, you take this seat. I think it's right behind the camera." And I said, "Okay," and the rest is an attempt to return silent movies to their rightful role in American cinema. Thanks a lot for having me here. I'll be signing books back there. Okay, I'm not off yet. Hold on.
You know, first of all, thank you very much for coming out. Howie and I do go back a little ways. I remember as a reporter, that was one thing. And then after 20-odd years, I retired from the news business and went to work where? So I show up in his column. He had myself and Peter Lucas, who was another writer, old-time street reporter. Between us, we had about 45 years in the business. So Howie wrote us both up as 2 new hacks. So a couple of my friends said, "Man, you see what he did to you?" I said, "You can't take this personal. You just have to live up to what he wrote." Okay? But, like, it's not all about the Bulgers. For a lot of us who have listened to his shows, and I hope you continue to listen to it, and also read him in the paper. I mean, some of the stuff that you get from him just comes off the page and just walks right through your mind. It just dances. And I was here to deliver greetings to you from the Lieutenant Governor wants to be governor, and she wanted to thank you for some of your recent columns.
Buffy!
Come on.
We have a story going in the Herald tomorrow that there are going to be about 800 people show up at the Republican convention next week in Lowell, and I said number one, my first prediction is they're going to be yard sales to get more people than that next Saturday. I said my second prediction is I'll definitely have more people at my book signing in Reading than the Republicans will have at their convention.
So it gets even better when you've been on the New York Times bestseller list for a while, and I wouldn't audition for the part of being the crusading journalist. There's not much of a resemblance, but who would you pick if you had to pick? Okay, who would you pick that for all the movie stars that we know, who did you think would be the crusading journalist? Any ideas here? I know Howie's been looking for some stuff in his columns. Nick Nolte was one of them, right?
Yeah.
Who else?
I mentioned he'd want Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt.
I did want Brad Pitt. Everyone else laughed at me and said, "What? Lenny Clark isn't available?"
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another Philip Seymour Hoffman. He was suggested as well. He has a girlfriend, you know.
When Howie and I first talked about him coming out, the thing that I told him most is I could not be happier for him. This story was there for anybody to pick up, and it just kind of like went by everybody, and then, like everything else, you see something and you get into it, and down the street at the Globe, man, they ain't got eye water over this one. the tears are all gone, right? Yeah.
They're very angry.
Yeah. We wanted to just thank the channel for coming out from Hudson, and thank each and every one of you. I would have been here a little bit earlier. We had something to do. And we want to thank you for coming out. You don't know how important it is for your continued support for the Friends of Marlborough Public Library, and to keep young people involved so that this thing continues, okay? So we want to just thank you so very much for coming out. I know the books are going to be for sale, right?
Yes. Thanks, Maurice, and thanks, Howie, so much.
Thank you, Ray.